everyone. Welcome back to the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. I'm Danny, and I'm so thankful you're here listening to another great episode. And today I'm doing an interview with Bronte May, and we're going to talk all about the thyroid. So many people have thyroid conditions, and the things that we talk about in this episode are not just relevant for thyroid, because we talk so much about stress reduction practices, circadian rhythms, and just lifestyle strategies to really help support whole body healing. So let me tell you more about Bronte. She is a naturopath with a passion for thyroid health. By the way, I'm outside if you can hear those birds. I think they sound nice. Bronte is a naturopath with a passion for thyroid health from a whole self-healing approach. She knows firsthand the multi-layered journey to heal from a thyroid autoimmune condition, having personally dealt with and healed from Graves' disease. She understands how healing the emotional aspects of disease can unlock a deeper healing, and that mindset coaching is a powerful key that also supports this often challenging journey. In fact, that is what she's super passionate about, and that is what she helps her clients through, and we talk so much about those strategies today. And she uses so many different modalities in her toolkit to help her clients heal on not only a cellular but also a soul level. She offers individualized one-on-one coaching and also group program support options. And I have left all of her links in the description below this video, or if you're listening to the audio version, inside of the show notes. So some of the topics we discuss are common thyroid personalities and how these affect blood sugar, the emotional drivers and patterns that show up with thyroid issues. We talk about the effects of both hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism on insulin, and the link between diabetes and thyroid disorders. So patients with diabetes are actually 3 times more likely to develop a thyroid disorder, and this is something I often see in my practice. We also go on to talk about circadian strategies for a better thyroid function, and of course, the importance of stress reduction practices on optimizing thyroid and metabolic function. You guys are going to love today's episode. Please, if you are loving the show, please rate it, review it, like it on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. It really helps the show to grow, and I so appreciate your support. And a big shout out to all our sponsors for today's episode. I really am vetting these companies really, really meticulously, because I want to bring you the very best things, and I own and have all of the things that I talk to you about and that are sponsors for the show. So thank you so much for supporting them as well. All right, let's dive into the interview with Bronte May. Okay, Bronte, I'm so happy to have you here on the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. You were referred to me by my good friend Maddie Lansdowne, and you live in Australia, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. In the very hot state in Queensland. It's very hot right now.
Very hot right now. It's finally getting warm here, so I was just actually laying out in the sun. Very happy to do that. But I would love to hear your story about how you got interested in working with the thyroid. We hear a lot about thyroid health and how important it is, and I think a lot of people just associate it with like, oh, I need to take a thyroid medication, or we don't really know the ins and outs. So let's start with your story.
So I was originally diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and I went on medications, and then I sought holistic support. And then within 7 months, I was off my medication. I thought everything was fine. And then 3 years later, my thyroid condition returned, but I didn't know that's what it was. So I had a bunch of symptoms that I didn't understand what was happening. I thought actually I had a heart condition, so I went to test that. So I had shortness of breath, rapid heart palpitations. When I went to the gym, within about 90 seconds on the bike, my heart rate was like close to 190. And I was like, this is not normal. And I was just like, couldn't get air in. I'd walk up a couple of steps and same thing, shortness of breath. And I was like, what is happening? The other thing that I had was really, really chronic depression. I was crying every day, and I'd had depression and anxiety years prior, before my first diagnosis. So I thought, oh my gosh, is my depression back? And I was actually suicidal at the time. And not because it was more physiological, it was because of my thyroid, but I didn't know this at the time. So I went to the doctor, they tested my heart, they ran a bunch of other labs. And when they came back, they said, you've got Graves' disease, and they referred me to the endocrinologist. From there, the endocrinologist gave me their treatment options, and to me they sounded really scary, and it was for me a full body no. My body was screaming at me like, no, this is not the route that we're going to go down. That's not our journey. So I left there in tears, and I reached out to a friend who was a medical researcher in sleep apnea, but nothing to do with thyroid, but she was the only person that I knew personally that knew something about the human body. And from there, she said, you need to go paleo. You need to clean up your diet. Now, I thought I had a healthy diet. I think most people do, meat and 3 veg is what most, country Aussie people probably grow up on. I grew up in the country. But, studying about the paleo lifestyle, I needed to change quite a few things. And I thought that was going to save me. And yes, it did. It helped me to heal. It got my antibodies down in under 3 months. However, from there, I had relapses because of other reasons, stress and things. But part of the treatment plan that the endocrinologist had suggested was radioactive iodine. And they said, look, you have radioactive iodine, you can have your thyroid removed. Or I said, what happens if I stay on the meds? And they said there's risks with that as well. And so when they gave me this warning piece of paper, they had this piece of paper with all these warnings about the radioactive iodine. And the 2 things that stood out to me were you can't be within, I think it's like 3 meters of a pregnant woman, because you could, they could be at risk of having, losing the pregnancy because of the radiation that's coming from you when you've taken the radioactive iodine pill. And I was like, well, that's weird, because it hasn't gone into their body. So I'm a risk to other people. So what is it doing to me? And the other thing that stood out was that my partner couldn't sleep in the same bed as me either for up to 2 weeks. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to put that in my body. If I'm a risk to other people, it could be like a really high risk to me. So, obviously I was a no. And the endo's like, oh, you've got 6 weeks to decide. Don't worry, you don't need to make a decision today. And I was like, yeah, thank goodness. I went back 6 weeks later and they said, look, what have you decided? And I said, well, I've created a 4th option for myself because I didn't like the options that you've presented to me. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I want to heal myself with food. And they told me I was crazy. But I wasn't there to prove them wrong. I was there, what I was doing was to help my own health, essentially. And so, yeah, that's what I did. And so I did change my diet. Yes, I did get improvements, but from there, I learnt so much more about the healing journey, and that it is way beyond what we do in the physical. Yes, what we do in the physical matters. We are a physical being, but we are way more than a physical being. So there's a lot more that needs to be included.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So then from there, I decided I wanted to study, and so that I could help other women to heal in a holistic way, in the way that I did, and not need to go down the route of, having their thyroid removed or having radioactive iodine, and actually feeling more self-empowered. I think for me, this journey, I guess initially I thought, why is this happening to me? And I thought, this is really shit. And I didn't even know what my thyroid was. I didn't know what it did. I didn't know how important it was, because none of this was explained to me. And so I think it's crazy that they even, one part of their treatment plan is like, well, let's just remove it if it's not working. Like, if you have a headache, you don't go and chop your head off, right? It's a pretty important part of the body. But if you have a headache, Yeah. And so I see that with the thyroid as well. Like, why is it such a quick, like, let's just cut it out? It just doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, so this journey has been very self-empowering for me. I wouldn't give it back for the world now. At the time, I felt very scared and alone and lost as to what do I do, particularly when I was, having my antibodies going up and down and having to learn, okay, what next? Like, I'm eating all the right things. Like, what else could I be doing wrong, And that's how I learned that there's way more than just the food. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. What a great story. And I want to dive into all these pieces of it, what you did to heal. I want to talk about the food and beyond that. And then I also want to talk about how thyroid impacts blood sugar, because obviously a lot of people in this podcast love to learn more about their blood sugar and insulin link. So let's start at the top. Let's start with what those questions that you had. Like, what is the thyroid? What does it do? Why is it so important? So why should we care about our thyroids, and why is it so crazy that like a doctor would think to cut it out?
Well, so the thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland at the front of the neck. It's just below the Adam's apple, and it produces thyroid hormones. These thyroid hormones, I can see your cat in the background. She's so cute.
There's three of them, so they might be in and out.
Yeah. Yeah, so it produces thyroid hormone. This thyroid hormone is involved in every cellular function in your body. And so it's pretty important. And so these cellular functions can range from your heart rate, your body temperature, your brain function, your mood, your hormonal signaling, your digestion. And it's very important in pregnancy for fetal development and brain development. So yeah, it's pretty important. And when it is too high or too low, you very, very much will feel it. And so common symptoms can be things like fatigue, and that's whether you're over or underactive. People generally will feel fatigued. Even overactive, they will feel like they just can't stop. Everything's just going so fast, and they just like go, go, go. They can't rest. They can be quite irritated, may not sleep very well, but they will still underline that. They will still feel fatigued, but the body's still pushing you to go. Other things are, if you're overactive, you're probably more sensitive to the heat, whereas if it's underactive, you may be more sensitive to the cold. And then same with the bowels. Overactive, quicker bowels, more frequent, more loose, and underactive, more constipated, more slow, and maybe harder to pass, things like that. Again, it has an effect on your menstrual cycle. So people who are overactive, they may have, their period may stop. Underactive, they may have heavier bleeds. So it does affect quite a lot. Your hair growth, I do notice a lot of people, even before they're diagnosed, you'll notice the outside third of the eyebrow can disappear. That's quite a common sign. But thinning hair as well, those sorts of things. What was the other part of your question? Did I answer that?
Yeah. So, and then why is it so important? I guess is because it's involved in every aspect of metabolism. And so same thing with our blood sugar and our thyroid, super common for metabolism. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah. So, so the thyroid hormone has quite an effect on our insulin levels and our production of insulin. So if you are underactive, the metabolism can be a lot slower. And so these people can put on more weight. But because the body is running a lot slower, then insulin production can be a lot slower as well. And the way that the body processes sugars can be a lot slower. And so that means that when the individual is eating any sort of meal and their sugar levels go up, then there's not enough insulin production, or the body is not as sensitive to insulin, and so then the blood sugar levels can be higher for those people. And then on the other side, for overactive thyroid, the body's running so much faster, so it is processing your glucose much faster, and so then that person can have lower blood sugar levels. And so it has quite an effect. The other thing is to understand what happens when we eat sugar. So it's sort of like a two-way communication here. So yes, how much thyroid hormone you have can have an influence on your insulin levels and the way that you process sugars in the body. However, when we eat sugar, our stress hormones go up. And so that's like your cortisol, your adrenaline. And so that can cause inflammation as well. So if you're someone who is constantly reaching for sugars, you're having sugar at breakfast, you're having sugar at your snack, or you're having sugar after lunch, you're having sugar in that 3 p.m. slump, and then after dinner, you're like, I need another little sweet treat, you're shooting your blood sugar up regularly throughout the day. The body is very intelligent, and it wants to keep an equilibrium or a balance within your body. And so it does freak out a bit when sugars shoot up. And so the body's like, oh shit, because the body, if your sugar levels are too high for too long, you actually can die. It is actually detrimental, really bad for the body. And the body knows that it has all of these systems that keep everything in balance. Your heart rate, your body temperature, your blood sugar, everything. And so when you're eating these sugars and your stress hormones go up, the body goes into freak out, and it's trying to bring it back into balance. If you're constantly eating sugars, you're constantly increasing all of your stress hormones. So when you have chronically high stress hormones, then there's inflammation in the body. That inflammation can have effect on so many systems, and this includes your thyroid. So there's that part of it as well. Then if we think about how the body detoxifies, so any sort of hormones within the body, when they get to chronic levels, can toxify the system, because, you know, like cortisol, for example, is actually anti-inflammatory, but when it gets to a chronic state where it's chronically high, it does become inflammatory. And this is the same with all of our hormones. Like, you need your estrogen and your progesterone, but when they get to chronically high levels, it causes inflammation, can lead to cancers, can lead to thyroid nodules, can lead to thyroid imbalances. So it's like everything needs to be in moderation. And, you know, what we do daily has an effect on all of these different systems. So stress is a big part as well. Like, a lot of people, when they're stressed, then obviously those inflammation markers go up, but people can then end up stress eating, you know, emotionally eating. And a lot of the times these people, when they're emotionally eating, they're reaching for the sugar, or they're reaching for those packaged carbohydrates. And this can shoot up blood sugar levels as well. Obviously, when people are stressed, when people are stressed, then they're not going to sleep so well. What happens when we don't sleep so well? We don't make very good food choices because we're tired, and so we want the quick energy. So we're reaching for the sugars and the carbohydrates. And then again, those two things, carbohydrates, the next step of conversion is to sugar. So then again, we're going back to that loop of high sugar, high stress levels, high inflammation, and that causes issues in the body. Yeah.
Amazing information. And I'm just sort of fascinated by that idea that hypothyroidism kind of slows insulin production. And I feel like my thyroid levels are always just on that low end. Like my free T3 is always on that low end of normal. So I'm like this suboptimal, subclinical hypothyroid sort of picture. And what I notice when I wear my continuous glucose monitors is that my blood sugar my blood sugar is really good. All my numbers are great. My insulin is very low. It's like 1.7, and here in the States, like, we kind of say ideally between like 2 and 4 or 2 and 5. So it's always kind of even below that, maybe that range. So maybe that low thyroid might have something to do with it. And I also tend to see that my blood sugar kind of stays elevated a little bit longer. It doesn't go up too high, but it's sort of like takes longer to come down. So I'm wondering if that's like that slow, the slow insulin production or something like that.
It could be part of the picture, but then you want to be looking at, why are you not converting your T4 into T3 effectively? And so there's many reasons for that. It could be because, regulating your blood sugar is your jam, and that's probably something that you do very much focus on, right? And so maybe you are eating low carbohydrates, and we need carbohydrates to convert the T4 to T3. So you might want to look at that and introduce some.
I have been eating quite a few carbs now. So
yeah,
I do have those back in. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I'm sure you're eating the right sort of carbs at the right time for you, and it's not the right time for, like, the right time for an individual is not the same across the board.
Exactly.
You might choose to do it at nighttime, and because a lot of people get sleepy after eating carbs, so they can choose to have it at nighttime and ride that sleep train to bed, kind of thing. The other thing
find
is
that's the worst time to eat carbs for most people, because we have worse insulin sensitivity during that time at night. And so especially if it's after dark, and then that high cortisol, we get the high insulin, and that competes with leptin, and that's going to start to dysregulate our whole metabolism and our circadian rhythms, and it also can interfere with sleep. So I do think that some people, it does help them sleep, but I do think it might end up causing more dysregulation. I don't know. There's so much bioindividuality. Yeah. And so I also like the idea of potentially having carbs earlier in the day, maybe at a lunch meal, where you're able to, moving afterwards, and you can like go for walks or
utilize
do
the
chores
energy
and use that energy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's when I tend to eat them.
Yeah.
And it depends how active the individual is as well. A lot of people are sedentary throughout the day, or they're sitting at an office, and so sometimes it might be better for those people to have it as an afternoon snack and go to the gym after work, or go for their afternoon walk, or whatever they do.
So you were talking about the conversion.
Conversion. Yeah, so then there is what you require for that conversion as well is selenium and zinc. So you might want to just check what your selenium zinc levels are, zinc and your zinc and copper ratio, just to see that that your copper is not too high in comparison to your zinc. That could be affecting things as well. So yeah, just something to investigate.
Info. Yes. And isn't gut and liver health important for conversion as well?
Yes, very much so. And so if you're having high blood sugar levels, then the body is having to store more of that glucose in the liver as glycogen. So that can put a strain on the liver, and about 60 to 70% of your thyroid hormone is actually converted in liver. So yeah, you're right about that as well. So it's looking after your liver health and just knowing what are the things that really tax the liver. So someone who's drinking coffee a lot, because that shoots up our stress hormones, drinking coffee. Do they eat a lot of sugar? Do they have lots of toxins in their environment by way of their body care? Are they not getting enough sleep as well? Are they someone who burns the candle? Are they up until like midnight, 1 o'clock, and so they're not getting effective sleep again? Elevating stress levels, and that can put a strain on the liver because the body's not getting its repair time. There's a lot to look at with the liver. And if you're constantly eating all the time, constantly snacking, there's so much. Like, I really wish a lot of this sort of basic information, like our basic foundations of health, was taught in school, but obviously it's not.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the things that you mentioned, there's like a lot of, let's say, big food advertising dollars spent to try to change that. So the idea that we have I directly remember learning you should have 3 meals and 3 snacks a day to, quote, keep your metabolism going. And it's honestly one of the worst things that you can do for your metabolism is this constant snacking and grazing that we do as a culture. And so I do think that there's a lot of big money interests that are actively teaching the opposite of these things too.
Totally.
So,
yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, we could go into like a big rabbit hole on that one as well, probably.
For sure. So we talked about how hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism impact insulin. And so are there any more links between that or different areas that you want to explore when it comes to blood sugar, diabetes, anything when it comes to the thyroid?
I think there's emotional drivers as well when it comes to all of this, because like we mentioned, like what we eat has such an impact on our body, whether it be a positive or a negative impact, depending on what it is that we're putting in our mouth and how often we're doing that. There's a lot that comes into what we eat and how we eat. But these sorts of things are very much influenced by the way that we were raised. So eating patterns and emotional patterns as well, how we deal with stress, a lot of that is learnt in childhood. And so these patterns run in families. And I think the thing that is often taught to many of us, even on a subconscious level, is, when you go to school and you get invited to a birthday party, and when you get there, if you look at the food on the table at a birthday party, most of it's not food, but where they're celebrating someone's birthday. So a lot of time when we go to celebrations, it's like, okay, let's eat some poison, let's not eat any real food. Or you do well at school, and so your parents like, let's go out to dinner, let's go to Pizza Hut or whatever. So then you're putting, so let's do that. And then as an adult, then, you've had a really stressful week and you're just like, oh, stuff it. Like, I'm just going to get takeaway and ice cream and chocolate and a bottle of wine because I deserve it because I've had a really stressful week, or I got a promotion, so I'm going to celebrate. And so again, it's the alcohol, the sugars, the processed carbs and things, heavier carbs. And so, that being aware of that, and so how we are taught to deal with stress as well. A lot of people may have grown up with people who do emotionally eat. There's a lot of those snacks in the cupboard, or at school because you're stressed, you're snacking on chips, you're snacking on chocolates, those sorts of things. So it's really understanding what are your drivers to reach for those foods, because a lot of people aren't comfortable with sitting with the uncomfortable. right? And so they're not knowing how to sit with their emotions, not knowing how to process them, not feeling safe in how to process them. It's scary to be like, I don't want to access that grief, or I don't want to go to that anger. And so they'll eat it, they'll push it down with food. And so what I encourage my patients to do is to start to really create that safety, to be able to sit with your emotions and get really curious about inquiring, what is it that I actually need? Apart from the food, what do I need, and how can I meet that need with something that is other than food? And, and this takes time to understand, what is it that you need? Like, how you're feeling this way, and then what do you actually need, or how do you want to feel, and what are the things that help you come back to balance, come back to that safety in your body? Is it nature? Do you need to call a friend for a talk? Do you need to move your body? Do you need to have a good cry? Do you just need to get to bed early? Do you need to run a bath and do something for yourself? Just inquiring what that is. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle with understanding self, understanding where your emotional eating or your drivers come from, and how you're dealing with stress, and then how to, create a new habit, create a new pattern for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's really powerful, and just such a good reminder, because I think so many of us, it's stressful out there. There's stressors from every angle, and there's also addictive, ultra-processed foods. And so it's there. Mm-hmm. We can't separate this emotional piece from, these eating behaviors can really impact a lot of people from getting well. And that idea of like, is there anything else I can do to help my body feel, supported, or like safe, or, get some joy or something like that. And I think it's really, really powerful. So those are really great tips, and also really good suggestions as well. So, and so is there any other, let's say, like a link between, if we talked about how thyroid can impact insulin and blood sugar, but is there an impact sort of the other way around? So if someone has blood sugar dysregulation, do we see that also impacting the thyroid?
Yes, it is. I think I did touch on this a little bit earlier, but so when you have high blood sugar, that causes high stress, like high stress within the body. So when we have high blood sugar, those stress hormones elevate. And so that's like your high cortisol, high adrenaline, that leads to inflammation. That inflammation can create an immune response. And so if the individual already has a thyroid imbalance, or a thyroid tripping over my words today, thyroid autoimmune, those thyroid antibodies can elevate too when there's higher inflammation in the body. And so all of this can then have an effect on the thyroid function, and then they're feeling tired. So remember what happens when we're tired, we can make poor choices, and then the loop keeps on looping. So it's like getting back to, what is the root cause of your imbalances? Is it your stress? Is it what you're eating? So it's starting to work backwards on that loop, and seeing what are the contributing factors, because it will be more than one. It won't just be what you're eating. It's like, okay, how are you managing your stress? And with the stress piece, like a lot of people be like, well, I'm a new mum, I'm not getting sleep, I'm breastfeeding, my child needs me constantly all day, or it's like they have a stressful job and they feel that they can't leave that job, or they're running a business, or whatever it is. I get it, because I went through this as well. I was working full-time and studying full-time when I was doing my degree to be a naturopath. And I had my naturopath at the time say to me, Bronte, something's got to give. You need to go part-time at work, or you need to go part-time at study. And neither of those were an option for me at the time. So I was like, all right, I need to problem solve this. If I cannot change my environment, the only thing I have control over is to change the way I respond to my environment. And that's how I knew that stress management was going to be a big key. So that was the way that I was going to get through my busy schedule. And so that's what I did. I implement.
Oh, sorry. There's a delay. Go ahead.
Sorry. And so, I implemented meditation. And I just started small. Like a lot of people go, but I can't meditate. Well, you don't need to sit there in silence for half an hour. Just start small. So start sitting with yourself 5 minutes twice a day, For me, I did 5 to 10 minutes 3 times a day. And then on weekends, I would go and sit in the park and earth and meditate for 30, 40 minutes each Saturday and Sunday. And so then for me, 7 weeks later, I tested all my labs and all my antibodies had gone back down. And the only thing I changed was implementing meditation. And so that's how I knew that that was such a powerful key. And so you don't need to meditate. Maybe that's not your jam. Find something else. Is it connecting to your hobby, connecting to something that brings you joy? Is it just being in nature? Is it yoga? Is it Tai Chi? Is it going to kirtan or just getting some music and singing? I really like, chanting mantras because it's like a repetitive thing. So it is like a meditation. That's why I love kirtan as well. Is it dancing? Like doing something where you can release stress out of your body and just be with your body? Is it doing some kind of breathing exercises? This is why I encourage all of my patients to explore a stress management tool. I give them different stress management tools each time I see them so that they can expand on their own toolkit and understand what is it they enjoy. A lot of people have never chanted before and then they come back like, oh my goodness, I really love it. I'm chanting while I'm like hanging out the washing with my bare feet while I'm earthing, getting sunlight, and like doing all the things while they're hanging the washing, And so, it's better to sit still and be present with yourself, obviously, with any sort of stress management. And that teaches you to be able to sit with yourself as well, to sit with your emotions, to be able to clear your mind. Yeah.
I love that. I had a lot of, I felt very averse to chanting when I was in yoga teacher training. And I was like, I don't want to do this. This is weird. Like, it was like immediate resistance came up. And I ended up loving mantra. And if you want to ground it in, something that has to do with our physical bodies, it's amazing for your vagus nerve, which turns on your parasympathetic nervous system. So, even just humming, if you don't want to say anything in a language you don't understand, that's totally fine. But just singing, humming is really, really good for your vagus nerve and parasympathetic nervous system. So that's really great.
Do you love it now?
I haven't done a lot of mantra or chanting in a long time, but I do feel like maybe I'm pretty inclined to bring that back. So thank you for that beautiful reminder.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. So you've given us a ton of stress reduction strategies and have stressed the importance of stress reduction, even if our environment there's still stressors. And I think that's such a good point that I always tell my clients, like, the stress is not going away. Yes, sometimes we can set boundaries. Yes, sometimes we can take a look at, let's say, relationships and say, is this relationship still serving me? How can I better protect myself? Are there hard conversations I need to have? Is there something, is there a habit that I'm doing that's actually driving up my stress and not really helping me? And I'm specifically thinking about my phone, so are there things that, areas in our life that we do have control over and can exert that control to get rid of some of these stressors? But there are some other stressors that just are not going anywhere. And I don't want people to think that health is not coming because you have no stress in your life and it's like, oh yeah, I finally made it. No, we actually need stress in our life. We need cortisol. We need these stress hormones, and we need to be able to adapt and get stronger. That's how stressors actually make us stronger, like exercise and like cold exposure and things like this. So stressors are so valuable, but if they're too much that we can't recover because we're just holding too much and there's just stuff coming at us from every end, then they will cause distress and they will start to cripple us or bring us into disease, right? But that idea that we do have control over, maybe the only time you get to yourself all day is like the 3 minutes you're sitting down on the toilet, and so if you do breath exercises, I've seen from wearing a heart rate monitor device, and that's measuring my heart rate variability, this measure of sort of resiliency towards stress, I've seen my HRV go up and be up at night from doing 1 minute of breathwork exercises 2 minutes a day. So, we're talking about tiny, tiny little bits. So if anyone's like, oh God, I don't have time to do all these things, like, we talk about we don't want you to be snacking, but like a movement snack or like a breathwork snack. Like instead of sitting down to eat something, it's like, can instead I sit down and just take some deep breaths into my belly, full deep breaths for just 30 seconds, 1 minute, and see, you know, how that changes your physiology, because sometimes it's the stress hormones that are running the show. And it's so habitual that if we can down regulate and tap into, you know, get those stress hormones out of the picture, we'll find our blood sugar comes down. My blood sugar comes down when I meditate. So it lowers because it's just a beautiful interplay of all these things. So anything you wanted to add to that?
I think you covered a lot there. That's really,
Okay.
and yet that's so powerful information as well to understand all of that, like managing our stress and having bite-sized chunks, right? And so what I will add is, yes, like you said, you know, we can't avoid stress, and stress is not a bad thing. Stress is only bad when we're stuck in that stress loop and it becomes like a chronic stress loop, right? So chronic stress. So what I advise my clients is, like you just said, have those stress management snacks instead of an actual food snack, right? And so checking in with your nervous system, and even if it's just a quick tool of just doing some breath work, because this creates that flexibility, because your nervous system is meant to have that flexibility. It's meant to go into that stress state and be like, okay, go, 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 we've got to get shit done, or we need to run from the bear, say. But then it also needs to be able to come back over here into the rest, digest, and repair state, into our parasympathetic, so it's more calm. And so you want it to be like that. You also don't want it to be stuck over here that it can never go, right? Yeah. So we don't want to be stuck either side, so we want this flexibility. And so what I get my patients to do is to check in throughout the day. So noticing when you're feeling more stressed. And so can you just stop and take a moment to reset? You know, some people are just like work. They're at an office job. They've got, you know, huge workload. They sit at their desk to eat, or they don't eat. And they just go from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. They're doing 12-hour days. And so it's really important that they do stop. Just take a moment. Even if it is like you said, when you're going to the bathroom, can you just take a moment to just stop, check in, take some breaths, reset? And like you said, you did these little short snippets and you saw such a difference in your body's response to that. And that's why when I implemented the meditations, I just did bite-sized chunks, 5 minutes. Who can't do 5 minutes 3 times a day? I did it on my lunch break. I went outside, sat on the grass or got sunlight for 5 minutes and just checked in. And so when you're flexing that muscle, the muscle gets stronger and it becomes part of your habit. It's like you don't forget to brush your teeth, right? Twice a day, or hopefully you don't. And so can you implement these small little check-ins with yourself as part of your daily habits?
Yeah.
And self-care.
I love that so much. Yeah, so good. So let's kind of bring it back to some food recommendations. So when it comes to thyroid, what do you see being really helpful for clients? And I'm sure there's individuality with this, but are there any sort of like hard and fast things that you recommend for the majority of your clients?
Yep. So I think a lot of it is about what we're not putting in as well, because a lot of people, like I said, you know, we think that we eat healthy, but we do have these habits that aren't so helpful to the body and for the thyroid function. And it's part of what a lot of people do. So it's gluten and dairy. A lot of people are having gluten and dairy because it's easy to make a sandwich or, you know, have some cereal with milk and stuff on it. So yeah, I feel that dairy and gluten really need to go. Obviously sugar, because it causes inflammation, and like we talked about before, that whole loop of what happens with, you know, sugar increasing stress hormones, increasing inflammation, and that affecting thyroid function. And the other thing is soy. So that would be the 4 things I would say to definitely leave out. The other thing is a lot of people who have an underactive thyroid, they're putting on weight, and so they're restricting their food, and you really don't want to do that. If you think of it like the body knows what it needs to do. And so when there is fuel sources coming in, it will assess of how much fuel it has to run all of the systems in your body. So it's governing that. That's what your metabolism does. It's like, all right, I've got this much fuel and I've got to run all of these systems. So I'm going to monitor how quick I use that fuel. Whereas if you're thinking, oh, well, I've put on weight and I want to restrict my food because I want to lose weight, then you're restricting your fuel source. And so what does the body do? It goes, well, I've only got this much fuel source, so I better like make sure the system runs even slower to make that fuel source last. So you don't really want to be restricting your fuel intake. And what was I going to say? Oh, yes, protein. A lot of people are starting their day with no breakfast. They're doing their intermittent fasting, or like I said, they're restricting their food intake, or they feel like they're not hungry. And they're starting their day with coffee. Coffee increases stress hormones. It has such an impact on gut health, thyroid function, your blood sugar, all of that. So they're just not starting their day off on the right foot. So what you really want to be doing is starting your day with a good quality protein source and fats and maybe low carbohydrates, or to no carbohydrates in the morning. So that's really important, making sure that you do have a good protein source at each of your meals as well. Yeah.
Those are great tips, and I completely agree with all of them. And I love that idea that you're talking about. Like, intermittent fasting is a great tool, but I often see people using, like, sort of eating at the wrong times, where it's a lot of people, you know, the 2018, 2019 messaging of like skipping breakfast really hit people hard. And you do see some benefits at the beginning because you're eating less and whatever. So people get benefits from this usually initially, but oftentimes it starts to really dysregulate cortisol because now we're having coffee and we're not eating for hours and we've just jacked up our cortisol and we're asking our body to run on stress hormones because we don't have any nutrients to run on. So what happens actually if you skip breakfast, studies show that your blood sugar response is actually higher after lunch and dinner when that happens. And then we just have this chronically way too high cortisol response, which can end us up in burnout if this lasts too long, or we're so high all the time that we have trouble unwinding. And so but then people are like, but Danny, I'm just not hungry in the morning. And it's like we've been training our bodies to, eat at 1 p.m. So we can train our bodies out of that, and we don't have to do it by tomorrow. So you have full permission to not have to have this fixed by tomorrow. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So do you have any tips for helping people to, start to be able to have an appetite in the morning, or like how they can sort of transition to start to eat breakfast if that's an issue for someone?
So you want to be looking into the digestion as well. That's part of the picture. So a lot of times people they don't have enough stomach acid production, so they're not actually effectively breaking down their food. So the food's sitting in the gut for so long overnight. This causes digestive issues, but it also causes you to not be hungry in the morning. So that's part of it as well. But I want to speak to something that you said in there. You're talking about, so, you're jacking up all of your stress hormones and then you're wired at nighttime. I want to speak to that because it's really important, because your higher stress hormones, like if you're doing all these things, drinking coffee, skipping meals, having a stressful lifestyle, not managing your stress, a lot of this light exposure as well at nighttime, people on their phones, on their laptop, watching Netflix, bright lights blaring, and so you're telling your body to keep those cortisol levels up. Your cortisol is your awakening hormone. But what happens when we have this high stress, so these high cortisol levels, is the opposite is our melatonin. So if there is high stress hormones, high cortisol, melatonin's naturally going to be much lower. And so then that's affecting your sleep. You're aging a lot faster as well if you don't have effective melatonin production and levels. And so then this all loops back into your blood sugar regulation as well. So, we've touched on so many topics today, and maybe people listening like, oh my goodness, there's too much to know. I think start with basics I think really what's important is to regulate your circadian rhythm so that your body is able to regulate all of its other systems, because if your circadian rhythm is screwed, so many other systems are affected. So I think start with prioritizing your sleep. Start with going to bed, have regular sleep patterns. So regular going to bed time, regular waking up time, getting that sunlight to let your body know, okay, we switch off the melatonin, we're awake now, turn on the cortisol. But then the flip side, in the afternoon, watch a sunset. Have dim lighting after 7:30 at night, and just change the light globes in your lamps at home so you have like a red or an orange or at least a yellow light and not these bright white lights. Get some blue light blocking lenses. So just really take care of your circadian rhythm. Manage your stress. Start there. And then move on to, okay, let's investigate what should I be eating? How should I be eating? But get your circadian rhythm reset. And just watch how life changes for you just with that. Like when I managed my stress, I was like, whoa, I feel like a completely different person, and reset my circadian rhythm. I went into one naturopath appointment and I was like a mess. I was crying. I walked out of there crying. I was really stressed. And then I implemented the meditation. 7 weeks later, walked into my next naturopath appointment, and he was like, whoa, wow, you're a different person. I was like, yeah, because I've managed my stress. I was present. I was in my body, and everything felt different. Yet my environment was still stressful, but I had changed. So I feel like, really start there so that you have more space to then make different, like to take in different knowledge and make different decisions. But without that space within you, because you've got shitty sleep, you're tired, and then from that, like we said before, we're making poor choices with our food. We're not able to manage, like there's more and more stress coming in and we just think we're going to combust. So start with your internal environment, reset your circadian rhythm, manage your stress, and then things will change. Your digestion will switch back on. So looping this back to people who aren't hungry in the morning. When you're stressed, of course your digestion's not going to work. Of course you're not going to producing that stomach acid production. So, I think, a big part of the root cause for many people is that managing your stress, resetting your circadian rhythm so you do sleep, you can wake up with energy, your digestion's switched on, you can sit down to a nutritious breakfast, fuel your body right, start your day right. You're going to feel like a different person just with that.
Yeah, I love that. Our thyroid hormone, our TSH and our T3 is also on a circadian loop, and it mimics what melatonin does, so that it rises at night. So that's just another reason to support good sleep by doing all these practices with, lowering the lights at night after the sun goes down. That's when there should be no blue light in our environment, because it wouldn't have been in nature. And so we can use these little, screen, like I can turn my screen red by clicking the side button 3 times. Well, it didn't work, but you turn screen filters on. You mentioned the blue light blocking glasses with orange lenses. You mentioned light bulbs. And these are simple things that we can do. And you don't have to, buy the most expensive things out there that really, really make a big difference, and that can help you get tired at night. Because like you said, that people are just like, they're wired, they can't fall asleep, and it's because they have this blue light blasting on them that's telling them, like, do not produce melatonin. You need to keep producing these stress hormones, because that's what their environment is saying. So
totally.
Great tips. Love that. And that in the morning, when we see sunrise, that slowly turns on cortisol, because we have the gradual rising of the sun, that gradual increase in the blue light, as opposed to what we're doing, what we talked about with skipping breakfast and fasting and just seeing your phone as the first thing, or opening the fridge. Like if you wake up before sunrise, you can put those blue light blocking glasses on again, and that's really, really supportive. And one of the new things that I have been learning as I'm diving more into the light stuff that I wanted to share on this thyroid oriented podcast episode is that when the sun gets to 10 to 30 degrees above the horizon, during that time, there's a very strong UVA light, so ultraviolet A light, and that light helps our bodies start to produce a lot of different neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine, things that help with energy and focus and drive and mood, but it also helps us to start creating thyroid hormones, so T4 and T3, and so it's like like you kept mentioning, like I'm going outside, like you go outside in the park and you're grounding. So all of these practices, getting into nature, and if you can there's apps that you can use to find out when UVA is in your latitude. If you're close to the equator, it doesn't really change very much, but the further you go from the equator, the more it'll change. So these are different things that we can do to really just maximize. If you can get outside, if you can crack a window and have that light in there, if you can, go for a morning walk during that time, you're just getting these, like, you're stacking on all the benefits. So when you are meditating, you are outside and grounding and meditating. So we're stacking all these benefits. It's not like we have to do all the things. We can work smarter, not harder, right? So just wanted to add those little nuggets as well.
Yeah. Yes, totally.
So
very, very important. And like just getting sunlight in general as well. Like a lot of people, they're always indoors, they're working an office job. They take their lunch break inside. Like if you can't get it at those optimal times, just get it at some point of the day as well. So can you just go sit outside? When I worked an office job, and I still do it now anyway, because I like to earth and I like to get sunlight, I go and sit on the grass to eat breakfast, go and sit on the grass to eat lunch. Like, be connected with nature. You are part of nature as well. So, yeah. But yeah, that app sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, it's the Circadian Life app. It's really helpful. And I know some people are probably thinking like, well, I don't want to touch the grass. There's bugs in the grass. You can also ground on cement, on concrete, on, stone, sand, dirt, rocks. So as long as it's touching the ground, and if you are like, well, I have shoes on, I'm not going to take my shoes off, your hands are conductive too. So you can literally hold a blade of grass. As long as it is rooted into the earth, you will be accessing all those negative electrons from the surface of the earth. Our body is negative. We want to maintain that charge. We're like a battery. So it's like when you plug your phone in, that's what you mentioned, earthing, grounding, same thing. That's what that is doing. So we can charge our batteries. We can get energy from more than just food. We can get energy from sunlight and from the earth. Obviously, we still need to eat food, but so these are other sources of helping get energy. Like when people have thyroid issues, blood sugar issues, the number one symptom I feel like you and I would both agree with is that people feel tired, maybe with the exception of hyperthyroid, but it's
they still feel tired too, though. They're they're just, their body's pushing them to keep going. Yeah, right. So it's like tired but wired. That's what it is with hyperthyroidism. Yeah. Sorry, cut you off.
No. So it's just, we like getting energy. It's like you said, the best thing we can do is get back into nature, because we are nature, and our modern lifestyles are what's stressing us out and divorcing us of from nature, and that is causing a lot of these issues. So I love your take on all of this, and you gave so many great takeaways and helpful tips that people can start implementing right away. So thank you so much for that. And where can people find you and hear more from you?
So I hang out mostly on Instagram, so brontemay.naturopath. It's the same handle for Facebook as well, but it's just my posts from Insta go through to Facebook. And my website is bronte-may.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I will link everything in the show notes. And yeah, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, take care.